Millions watched the shows. Few ever saw what it took to get there. Behind the record-breaking tours, the horror-tinged music videos, and the gravity-defying dance moves was a performer who treated rehearsal like a religion, arriving at empty arenas hours early, running the same 8 counts over and over until every gesture looked inevitable rather than practiced. This is a look at the discipline, the risk-taking, and a few of the strange stories behind the moments that turned Michael Jackson into a global icon. Long before Thriller became the best-selling album of all time, its title track was an experiment. What if a pop song could feel like a horror film, instead of a straightforward dance record? The production leaned into synthesizers that felt more unsettling than danceable, sound design lifted from Midnight Monster movies, and a spoken word passage that sounded like it belonged in a different genre altogether. Horror imagery ran straight through the lyrics, and that concept didn't stay contained to the studio. It expanded into choreography and, eventually, into one of the most famous short films ever made for a song. Decades on, that fusion of dread and rhythm is still what people picture when they think of the track. One image that still circulates shows a man resembling Jackson lying on a studio floor, seemingly worn out after a long rehearsal. Fedora over his eyes, dance shoes discarded nearby, and white socks stained an unsettling red. Some say it's simple stage blood, evidence of an artistic bit. Others question whether the photo is genuine at all. Either way, it's become one of those artifacts fans still argue about. When the Bad World Tour opened in Japan in September 1987, it wasn't just Jackson's first tour as a solo headliner. It turned into one of the biggest live spectacles the industry had ever staged. Over 16 months, the tour hit 15 countries across Asia, Europe, North America, and Australia for 123 shows. 7 sold-out nights at Wembley Stadium alone drew more than 500,000 fans. By the time it wrapped, total attendance topped 4.5 million people, and box office receipts hit roughly $125 million. Enough to make it the highest-grossing tour of the 1980s. None of it happened by accident. Jackson was known for showing up to empty venues well before rehearsals began, drilling footwork and vocal cues until the elaborate staging, lighting, and costume changes felt seamless rather than mechanical. Billie Jean grew out of something darker than a catchy bass line. Years of intense public attention had brought false paternity claims and unsettling encounters with obsessive fans, and that tension between admiration and fixation became the emotional backbone of the song. The music itself reportedly started with a bass line that came to Jackson while he was driving and wouldn't leave his head. Around that hook, he built one of the most recognizable songs in pop history. The performance that cemented the song's legacy, the 1983 Motown 25 special, was a product of relentless rehearsal, all captured in footage that later surfaced, showing just how many times each move was repeated before it looked effortless. Even so, Jackson was reportedly unhappy with his own performance afterward, feeling he'd fumbled the landing on his signature toe stand. It took a congratulatory phone call from dance legend Fred Astaire to convince him performance had actually landed. That same Motown special is where the moonwalk entered the cultural bloodstream. For a few seconds, a dance move built on precise footwork and weight transfer created the illusion that Jackson was walking forward while actually sliding backward, as if gravity had briefly stopped applying to him. The technique wasn't invented from nothing. It drew on backsliding moves borrowed from underground popping and boogaloo dancers Jackson had studied. But in his hands, it became an instantly iconic symbol, one that's been studied, imitated, and reinterpreted by performers ever since. In the mid-1990s, Jackson pushed the short film format further than almost anyone had before, turning a music video into a nearly 40-minute piece of dance and horror storytelling. The choreography in that project was noticeably darker and more aggressive than his earlier, lighter style, sharp stomps, hard isolations. An intense facial expression replaced playfulness with something closer to menace. Its most talked-about sequence featured a dancing skeleton built using early motion capture technology, with Jackson's own movements digitally transferred onto the animated character, so that every detail of the choreography carried over. Smooth Criminal told a tense, noir-tinged story of an intruder and a victim named Annie, driven by a booming beat and eerie heartbeat sound effects. But the moment that made it legendary wasn't the lyrics. It was the anti-gravity lean, where performers tilted forward at an angle that looked physically impossible with no visible support. In the film, Hidden rigging created the illusion. For live shows, engineers later designed special shoes that locked into anchors built into the stage floor, letting Jackson and his dancer perform the same lean in front of live audiences. Even with the mechanism doing the heavy lifting, pulling it off required serious control and precision. In 2009, Jackson was deep into rehearsals for what was meant to be a major comeback concert residency. New stagecraft, reimagined versions of his classic songs, and choreography blending his signature moves with more contemporary styles. The rehearsal footage from that period was never meant to be seen by the public. It was shot purely as a production reference. After Jackson's death that June, that footage became something else entirely. A final, unintended record of performers still chasing perfection right up to the end. The concerts themselves never took place. Released on 1983's Thriller, Beat It fused hard rock with pop production courtesy of Quincy Jones, and famously featured a guitar solo from Eddie Van Halen. It topped both the Billboard Hot 100 and the R&B charts, and became one of the best-selling singles ever, moving more than 10 million copies. The video, which cast real members of rival Los Angeles gangs, helped position Jackson as an artist who could cross genre lines that had previously felt fixed. His performance combined sharp, martial arm movements with street dance energy, locked elbows, shoulder shimmies, tight spins, sudden freezes, creating a visual vocabulary that's still influencing choreographers today. Built from a shelled idea that eventually became one of the more confrontational tracks of his career, this militaristic, samba-infused song turned personal frustration into a broader statement about injustice and social neglect. Its lyrics drew controversy and accusations, though Jackson maintained the intent was to expose prejudice rather than endorse it. Two contrasting music videos, one set in a vibrant community space, the other paired with real archival footage of war and oppression, expanded its reach into something closer to a protest anthem than a pop single. The title track from 1987's Bad marked a deliberate shift in image, sharper, tougher, more confrontational. Co-written and co-produced with Quincy Jones and inspired by a real story about pride and survival, the song leaned on driving bass lines and aggressive vocal delivery. Its short film, directed by Martin Scorsese, reimagined a subway standoff as a dance battle, with choreography built around hard-hitting arm strikes, fast footwork, and tightly synchronized group formations that reinforced the song's tougher persona. Also from Bad, Dirty Diana leaned into hard rock with aggressive guitar work from Steve Stevens, giving it a heavier sound than Jackson's earlier pop material. Lyrically, it followed a performer caught between temptation and guilt, pulled toward the pressures of obsessive fan culture. Some listeners read it as one thing. Jackson framed it as more of a cautionary story about fame's darker undercurrents than a simple narrative about romance. Rehearsals for the 1993 tour supporting Dangerous built a stage style that mixed formal, almost courtly control with sharp street dance attitude. Dancers trained to move as a single mechanically precise unit, with every snap and freeze demanding exact timing built through repetition. The tone leaned into a noir cinematic atmosphere, as much about the silence between beats as the movement itself. And it reshaped what large-scale pop choreography could look like. Released on 1992's Dangerous. In the Closet combined Teddy Riley's new Jack Swing production with more intimate, restrained vocal performance from Jackson. Its uncredited female vocals were later identified as belonging to Princess Stephanie of Monaco, and the track was originally conceived as a duet.